Okay, I'll call the meeting to order, and we will have Boy Scout Troop 323 posting of the colors. So why don't you come up here, young man, to the podium and start your,
Okay.
so,
Scout attention. Audience, please rise. Please remove all non-scouting headgear. Scout salute. Those not in uniform, hand over heart. Color guard advance. Color guard post the colors. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. What? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
thank you. You're more than welcome to stay and watch the council meeting if you wish to, so. Approval of the regular agenda. Take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Rick, seconded by Bruce to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The consent agenda, did everybody have a chance to glance at that?
Yes, and I've got a couple of questions, please.
Okay, should,
Thank you. So on the agreement for the joint powers agreement, Jim, I was a little confused about the membership. On your cover page, it says $8,400, but within the agreement, it says voting membership is $16,800. And then it lists Belle Plaine for some reason, and then voting membership for cities and counties with populations less than 7,000. So I'm not sure where we fit in.
At this time, they're only counting the Scott County side for population.
For population, okay.
7,000.
Okay, super, thank you. I was a little confused. And then on the sanitary and storm sewer proposed write-offs, just a question, why don't we put a lien against the property like we do with our other utilities?
Well, in this specific one, it was actually an error that had occurred. And so it wasn't actually where they did not pay it. It was in between two different residents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all righty. That's all that I had, thank you.
okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'd take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Who was that? Rick made the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, we are to item number 10 with the resolutions. So who wants to take that one?
Yes, so this first item is Resolution 21-12-2002, approving the memorandum of agreement between the state of Minnesota and local governments and authorizing participation in national opioid settlements. This particular item, recently there's been some court movement in a couple national lawsuits with this. And the Attorney General, as I've included in your packet, came out with a kind of a letter of opinion on how potential funds would be released to the state or cities who decide to participate. For cities less than 10,000 people, there's not currently an avenue to receive funds. That being said, signing on now, or speaking with our city attorney, signing on now as a city would allow us to, if they become available to cities of our size, to participate. And so that is what this would be. There are some cities who are probably going alone without joining this larger suit. It was the attorney, or it was Scott's opinion that it was really more for larger cities, and he didn't know of a benefit that we would have necessarily going alone about it. But I believe he is on the call this evening if you have any other questions.
Okay. Any other questions on the agreement? Otherwise, I'll offer resolution number 21-12-20-02, approving the memorandum of agreement between the state of Minnesota and local governments and authorizing participation in the national opioid settlements.
I'll second.
Maggie seconded it. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Abstain.
Okay. Rick abstained. So.
The next item is resolution 21-12-2003. This is a resolution that will be reappointing the charter commission members whose terms were up. Those members were Maggie Bass, Brad Carlson, Dwayne Jerick, and Kay Wilcox. I have spoken to each of these individuals, and they are interested in serving another term on the charter commission.
Okay. Any questions? Otherwise, I'd take a motion to appoint the charter commission appointments.
So moved.
Rick made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Bruce had seconded it. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
The next resolution, 21-12-2004, would be adopting the 2021 property tax levy payable in 2022. I enclosed in your packet kind of the split out and the three breaks of those, but the total levy would come to $4,660,878.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none, I would take a motion to approve the levy.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 21-12-2004 of adopting the property tax levy.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Bruce made the second. Any discussion?
I just have a comment. I noticed on my property tax statement that the tax rate is probably a little higher than what we're estimating. I think there was a slight change in the tax capacity from the original estimates that we were given by the county in August, and I think, that happens. And I think the truth in taxation worked out to be closer to 52.14% tax rate, so it's a slight difference. So if people see that and notice that, that's probably what the variance is going on in your tax statement. So our tax rate is going up a little higher than what we probably estimated. And the final tax capacity isn't really achieved, I think, until February or finalized or sometime early next year. So it could change again, that tax rate estimate that we use. So it's more than likely going to be a little higher than 51.9 is what I'm understanding, but that's just for information's sake. If anyone else, no one's probably as anal as I am looking at their property tax statement, but I saw that.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay,
Got a vote on it?
we got to vote. Okay, so is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Next item, resolution 21-12-2005 would be adopting the 2022 city budget. Nothing has changed since our truth and taxation hearing at the last meeting on December 6th. So I'd be recommending approval of that resolution.
Okay, I'll offer the motion adopting the 2022 city budget, resolution number 21-12-20-05. Is there a second?
Second.
Rick made the second. Is there any discussion?
I just had a question. Is there a CIP that would go with this, or are we going to see that later?
We can see that later. I know when I was looking through it, it didn't look like that got fully updated for maybe 9 years from now. All the numbers I was seeing, it looked like we're kind of working off of last year's CIP. And so I kind of figured out we'd roll that in in terms of seeing that 9th year, 10th year, whatever it would be, would come a little later.
So like next month, or?
Yeah, I mean, we could see it next month even.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is authorizing transfer and closure of debt.
Yes, the next resolution, 21-12-2006, has to do with our debt service funds. Most recently, we did do some refunding of funds 2010A, 2012A, 2012B, and 2013A. And so this would be rolling the existing amounts in those funds over into the new debt service fund for payments. And I believe closing these ones out, correct, Patty?
That's correct.
Okay, so explain that a little bit more to me.
So within government accounting, think of it a lot of buckets, and out of each bucket, we're gonna pay our debts. And so we have a bucket for Fund 2010A, the bond that we took out that particular year. When we refunded, we basically bought a new bucket that with this lower interest rate and basically paid off all the debts of those old 4 buckets, but now we're carrying that debt in the new bucket. So those 4 buckets still had a little bit of money left over in them from whether assessments or whatnot. And so we're just taking that money that would have been paying off the debts over here, kind of dumping it all in the new bucket since that's where all the new debt is sitting. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you. Okay, I would take a motion to transfer the authorize the transfer and closure of the debt service funds.
So moved.
Bruce made the motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Maggie seconded it, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay, the next item, F.
I'll take that one, Mr. Mayor. So the next item is Resolution 21-12-2007. We have in front of you tonight the resolution that would approve the application to the state, basically, for some voting equipment grant account funds that are available. If you recall, during the budgeting process, we talked that Scott County is mandating that the Scott County side of New Prague provide for in-person absentee ballot processing. And in order to accommodate that, we have to purchase a new tabulator and a poll pad, because we'll have walk-in traffic for that time period before the next election that we have in the city here. So we had budgeted just under $9,000 for those items, but based on a current estimate and the grant application that we're making, the cost of that poll pad and the tabulator actually were a little bit over $9,200, but this grant would cover 50% of the tabulator and then 75% of the poll pad cost. So we could get about $4,900 or $49.43 out of the grant. So roughly a little over half of our budgeted expense, but we don't know that for sure. We'll get the grant. The application was actually due on the 17th, last Friday, kind of a short turnaround. So looking for your permission to formally turn that in. They let us have a couple day grace period here, obviously. And hopefully we get funded for the grant for that new equipment.
Okay,
So moved.
okay, Rick made a motion, is there a second?
Second.
And Bruce seconded it, any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Okay, the next item is the golf course equipment.
Yes, next item is Resolution 21-12-2008. This resolution is related to the golf course equipment in that it would allow us to pay cash now for the equipment with the intent that we may bond for it later. Speaking with our bond counsel, this is something that is done regularly by a lot of cities, and we even perform it a lot of times the street projects, so that way we're able to pay cash for engineering fees up front, knowing that we'll then bond and pay ourselves back later. So the question not only is, do we want to pass the resolution that would allow us to do that? Also, it would be how much golf equipment we actually want to end up purchasing. In your packet, I included a list of recommendations from Jeff Pint, our superintendent out there. He kind of laid out kind of the differences between the John Deere equipment and the Toro equipment and how he kind of saw that. And I was speaking with him. He preferred the Toro equipment one, even though the kind of the large mower was a little more expensive. It was 12 feet wide versus 9 feet wide. And if you look in the picture he provided, there are some overhangs basically where the wheels aren't at. They didn't like that equipment only in that they can get really, basically go over the tops of certain things such as bunkers without having to drop a wheel in or that sort of thing. He also said he preferred the Toro hybrid mowers in that that's the equipment they currently have, and so they would be able to swap out parts between them and that sort of thing. And finally, the trap machine, also being Toro, I believe is actually slightly less expensive on the Toro than it would be on the John Deere. I was remembering that correctly when I put this back together. So when it all comes together, the quote on the John Deere would come up because they didn't include sales tax. I estimated that out to be come up to $194,700, about $194,000. So it does come up about $13,000 over what we were quoted once we include tax in there. And the Toro quote is roughly $30,000. Would be roughly $30,000 higher than that. And so that would be the big question. I know, like I said, they like the Toro stuff because that's what we currently have, so they can swap parts. Plus, the rough mower itself is just a much larger mower than what John Deere even makes, which they prefer. So, I guess they did also. I included their whole CIP equipment list in the package. I believe there were 8 items on there. So I asked priorities. Those were the 4 that were given to me. And I know looking at the other equipment, those are a little bit lower dollar value estimates on what we think those would be. So I guess my recommendation at this point, not knowing equipment prices, would be if we're going to buy equipment, to buy those 4 highlighted in yellow, included in your packet. And then as the year starts, we can examine kind of how the year's going and its potential that whether we bond for it or maybe we can pay cash for some of those items, knowing that we had a good year last year. That may be the way to go forward with that.
Okay.
So any questions, I guess? I know I kind of talked quickly there.
So the equipment list, is that the current description of the current equipment, or is that the ones in yellow, the ones they're purchasing?
So the whole list is the list of current equipment, and the ones in yellow were the ones that they said were a priority they thought.
So those numbers don't reflect the purchase of the description of the new equipment they're buying?
Correct. Yeah, those would be the ones they'd be replacing. The Jacobson Green King, the Toro 470, and the Toro Sand Pro.
So even though they're describing their current equipment, the numbers in the year 2022 column, are they represent what?
Those represented their best estimate as to what they thought the equipment
To replace that particular equipment. So to line up the Greenmaster Triflex Hybrid for 68,000, we'd have to take the first 2, or?
Yes, and so, yeah, so the 470, I believe, is the one we've already. Which one are you looking at here? So the Groundsmaster 470 would just be the updated model from Priority 3 there to the Toro 470. The Sand Pro, it looks like, is also the same one. In terms of the Greenmaster Triflex Hybrid, those would be replacing the Greens Kings.
I mean, just ballparking it, their estimates are low then, is that fair to say?
Correct. So it looks like the Toro was low, $13,000. The Sand Pro was pretty close on there. And the other ones were low about $3,000 on average. So it was, really the big estimate that was off there was the Toro 470. Higher than was expected.
But they're buying that and replacing 2.
Correct. Yeah, so it sounds like they'd be replacing two, the Toro and the Sand Pro, they would hold on to the other two just so they could swap equipment off of it, and potentially, he was kind of explaining to me of putting certain newer mowers on certain areas because they cut a little better than that sort of thing. He did say there would be trade-in, it sounds like, but he didn't know the exact trade-in value, just knowing how equipment's going until we could actually get stuff in, what kind of wear would be on the current
Yeah.
machines.
I guess the only question I had on the Sand Pro is how much would the accessories be if they went with the John Deere instead of the reuse?
Yep, so it sounds like the accessories,
I couldn't quite tell what accessories went with what on the estimate.
question I didn't see there. It sounded like, speaking to him, that kind of everything that we would need would be already included on there. And it sounded like there might be a few attachments on the current Sand Pro. Which is, but for the most part, the larger accessories would be included with the John Deere price.
Now, we're gonna be getting that Toro at the same price that what he was talking about last week? Or is that the estimate that was off?
That was, if he was going off of this, I think, which he was, I think that's the estimate that was low, a few $1,000s. For, in terms of the Sand Pro, yeah, the big one, I think he'd mentioned about $90,000 last week.
And the thing about waiting with this is the price goes up dramatically. I mean, we wait till next year, but we'd be paying,
Yeah, well, according to Kurt, it was just the availability of the equipment. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, cause I think the one that they were really worried about availability was that big one,
yep.
4700.
Yeah, I think he had found a dealer that had one, and there was a suggestion made that maybe he call and see if they can hold it for him, so.
Okay,
The sales tax question, we normally have paid sales tax for the golf course in the past, then?
Yes, and so that was my first question, and, you know, speaking with Patty, it sounds like we're an entity like a golf course, because they are able to, because they kind of compete with other private entities to make that more fair, then we're required to pay sales tax for that. It'd be for entity, like if we were buying a sand truck or something to plow with, we wouldn't normally pay sales tax on that, I don't.
okay. Any other questions?
I'll move it just because, you know, to delay it or to wait too long, I think we're gonna have to pay for that. So I'll move it.
Okay, Rick made a motion, is there a second? To approve the golf course's recommendation. I'll second the golf course equipment purchase.
Is there a time limit for the bond to occur? I can't recall if I read that in here now.
What did our bond council say, 3 years?
It has to happen 3 years after this resolution?
Something like,
Yes,
if we're gonna
for the
do it, we have to
reimbursing
do it, we
resolution.
have to do it within 3 years if we're gonna do it.
It's ironic to me that we're talking about a tax exempt bond issue, but yet we have to pay sales tax. It just seems weird.
Yeah.
They refer to it as an equipment certificate. So there's kind of that little loophole there.
Okay.
It's like a fee and a tax, right?
So then would we have, if we wanted to increase this number, would we have to pass another resolution then?
So yes, there's a couple ways of doing it. One way of doing it would be to add an exhibit to the resolution that would basically allow it to do it without having to. Our bond counsel thought that this was kind of a simple enough matter that it may just be easier in our case to just pass another resolution if we wanted to do that. I mean, because at this point it's just kind of a template, and I would just kind of change the numbers in it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just one last one. the bonding, if we don't bond it and we just end up paying cash for it, when will that show up in front of us again so that we know what happened? You know what I mean?
So I think what we would end up doing was when we bond for, the 2022 project, we would then have that discussion. Do we want to bond for this previous equipment? This is what we spent on it. Maybe this is kind of how the golf course has been doing this year. And we would have that conversation. We'll basically have the conversation again as to whether we actually want to bond for it or not. So what we're doing tonight would be kind of approving whether we're gonna pay for it in cash and give ourselves the option later of bonding for it.
Am I understanding it correctly? Once we pass this, we will be funding it through the general fund and then and basically the golf course will show it as a debt to the city and then we'll be paying ourselves back or?
So I mean, so all of our money is kind of, though we have a bunch of funds and buckets, it's all kind of in one master bucket. And what we would do is we would just show a negative in the golf course fund, for the time being, paying for out of the reserves that we have in other funds. But I don't think we'd have to make a formal transfer, would we, Patty?
No.
But would it be reflected in the golf course financial statements?
Yes.
Okay, that's, yeah.
And you also have the option too, I really truly don't believe that the golf course can fund that equipment out of cash. But you do have the option to do a couple of the items. You don't have to do them all.
Right.
So just depending upon what we see at the time when it comes to bonding.
Yeah, I would agree that, my hope would be that the golf course could hopefully build up more of a cash balance. And I don't see any of this coming out of their existing funds, but hopefully would be able to prepare themselves for a cash flow basis to self-fund themselves.
And it'd be horrible to take the first year that they actually make a profit and then turn around and put it all right back into the equipment. I don't know. The bonding idea sounds like a better idea for me, but we'll see what happens later on, I guess, right?
Yeah, and this resolution really would just give us the option later on to be able to bond if we wanted to.
I think when Kurt had presented to us before, it was just the largest mower that he was requesting and not the other three pieces of equipment. So that seemed to be a more priority for him based on availability.
Yeah, I think what I remember him saying is they have one that's there, but he
Right.
needs to put his finger on it right away, otherwise it'll be gone and there is not another one coming
Right, yeah.
foreseeable future.
Yeah, but the other three pieces of equipment that we're seeing in this request wasn't discussed as a priority.
So, yes, so I think what they did at the golf board meeting was the golf board approved the whole list of 8 is what they approved. And when I asked Kurt to speak to priorities, I think that was the big one he wanted to speak to, like you said, because of availability. But I know when I talked to Jeff or even Kurt on the side, the 4 of them they discussed in kind of order of priority, and then ultimately they'd like to do all 8, but.
Well, I would be okay with the largest mower as discussed in our last council meeting, but certainly open to input. So the 4,700 12.5-foot mower.
The only question I have for that is when they do need it, is that one gonna be available? I mean, and how much more are you gonna be paying? A year from now, these might be way higher, so I don't blame him for wanting to get that while he can.
Well, I don't think that we're denying his original request for the largest mower, and the other items were not discussed or requested. So I don't know if they have the same limited availability as the largest mower.
I guess I understood what he was saying a little differently.
Okay,
I understood that he wanted all of it, but this particular one, the 85,000, is the one that he had to know in December because they only had one in stock, and there wouldn't be another one coming in the foreseeable future. That all of them were ones they wanted for next year.
okay,
Just that particular one,
that was a problem, okay.
I have to kind of know in December, otherwise we're not gonna get it at all,
Right, okay.
how I interpreted what he said. So he, I think the original request for next year, I think, was actually more than, I remember the 260-some thousand number, but I don't have the sheet in front of us.
For something like
But,
that.
so I guess I remember it maybe a little differently, what he was what his request was.
Well, I think there is a motion and a second on the
Yes,
table, so,
So, there isn't any other discussion, I would take a motion to approve the request to the golf course. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I was just gonna clarify that we are approving the 4 or the 1.
I think the 4
Okay.
or-
originally.
Okay.
Opposed,
Just wanna make sure.
motion carries. Okay, the next item is the labor agreement for 2022 and 2023 with the police union.
Yes, next item I've included in your packet as to some of the changes that we had discussed, as well as the labor union. Some of those changes include updating the dates, replacing the numerals, changing what is considered a normal shift, from 8 to 10 hours to 8 to 12 hours, a provision that allows for, any holiday mandated by the state to be included for them, updating life insurance amounts to match city employees, back paying union members to June 1st, according to the 2021 compensation study, increasing uniform allowance by $25, and then updating their compensation scale to match the compensation study, and then including a wage adjustment for 2022 and 2023, both at 2.5%. So the police union has agreed, has reviewed this, and approved the document prior to this meeting.
Okay. Are there questions? Otherwise, I'd take a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the 2022-23 labor agreement with LELS and the police union.
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Next item is the 2022 compensations plan. This kind of goes along with the budget and is just an overall update that shows a 2.5% increase, as we discussed throughout our budget workshop meetings.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay, the next item is the rental dwelling inspection ordinance.
All right, so as requested by the council at the November 15th, 2021 city council meeting, there was a request made to have a recap of our past rental dwelling inspection ordinance discussions. Really what kind of got the discussion going on this topic again was we had the abatement order for the property at 703 2nd Street Northeast, which was obviously a rental home where the landlord and tenant both had allowed the property to come into a not so great condition after a roughly 2-year rental period over there. What we talked about was that, you know, had we had a rental inspection ordinance that could have prevented the severity of some of those issues with that program, had we had one in place. I did want to call attention before I get too far into this. In talking with Scott County Public Health, I did have a letter put on the back of the packet from Lisa Brodsky, the Public Health Director for the county, noting that in other cities where there are rental inspection codes in place, it does help head off a number of those issues. If you look in the packet right before that letter, you can note some of the things that we had talked about for minimum inspections. And particularly in the case of this home where we had this issue, you know, there would have been inspection on plumbing. We had the initial sewer issue in the basement of that home. And then while we were in there, obviously, we could have checked for just general refuse, which is the bottom item on that list, and other conditions in the property, general nuisance type things, which we already were addressing, but that was obviously exterior, and we never were able to get into the house. So this obviously would get you into the house, getting a first look at those issues, rather than obviously not being able to do that without the inspection ordinance. So as we've talked in the past, we have a rental registration program currently does not do anything other than register the properties that are rental and include a list of them, where they're located. And the reason we have that is, number one, from back in 2008 when that went into place, was to track and see where the trends of the rental properties were in the town, because we didn't have any data on that previously. And then it was also been useful for contacting landlords, contacting property owners if we had exterior issues with property maintenance and the like, and that's actually been very helpful for that, to quickly get a hold of a local landlord, that type of thing. We've had a pretty consistent listing of about 600 residential units. That can fluctuate up and down every 2-year time period, but most recent registration, we had about 600 units, and those are located in about 197 units, or buildings from that time. So you've got apartment buildings with, you know, upwards of 50 units in some cases, and then the vast majority are, you know, duplexes, 1 unit, even single-family homes that are being rented out on their own as a unit for a rental. So roughly 200 buildings that would need to be inspected if we went on the path of having a ordinance to do that. So into the past discussion of what we had, so going back to 2013, we had some presentations from myself and building official Lunder, just on a very, you know, base level on property maintenance and what rental inspection codes were about. Fast forward to 2015 through 2019, those were included at various times in the strategic planning goals of the council. And then that ultimately led into a workshop that was held on March 11th of 2019. And we had landlords, tenants, and pretty lengthy discussion. Had the city attorney and other representatives from the firm in for that meeting. Ended up doing some data collection for about a 6-month time period, trying to track where we were getting complaints from tenants and neighboring properties to rental properties. So that was presented in October of 2019. While we were doing the collection, we had a tenant come in at our August 5th, 2019 meeting to provide a overview and a presentation of her particular issue she had at a rental property, and how she felt that a rental code could help a situation that she had been in a home or a rental unit, apartment unit here in New Prague. And ultimately, where we really kind of lost traction of this was as we were heading, not knowing that COVID was gonna happen, but in the fall of 2019, we advertised, the council advertised the task force to be set up that was gonna have 2 at-large members, 2 tenants, 2 landlords, and then 1 council member. We advertised, had a hard time getting people to apply kind of over the holidays, so it got extended out, and then ended up having a council meeting get canceled, and then ultimately COVID hit in March of 2020, and not being able to meet in person, we did not ever actually get the task force appointed. And that was really where it was left at this point. I did put the memo that was going to go to the council at that time in the packet, and we had a list of 9 different names to fill the 6 different positions that we had available. But that was really where we ended. So from staff's perspective, I think we would still recommend, if you wanted to move forward, I think the task force would be a good way to get that input from the tenants and landlords, and obviously a council representative along with staff support, and really discuss the merit of having a local rental ordinance. It may turn out that that task force wouldn't recommend one. We don't know, but to at least talk through it. You know, it's difficult to have back forth discussion like we've had with the landlords at the meetings that we did have. I know landlords had concern about extra cost, you know, potential increase of rent to people that are renting if they have to fix up, you know, a number of violations, that type of thing. So, you know, I think we're aware of those situations, but at the base of it, we just want to make sure there's a basic life safety component being reviewed, and that this would provide that. And again, we don't want to have any profit made here. We're trying to cover costs, and again, just, you know, the minimum type things. And quite honestly, that issue at that home, and we've had other homes in town that were rented, that this would have helped head off issues. And as we had talked with the data collection, it was, you know, not that we get a ton of calls on these, but a lot of times the tenants don't have a resource to go to other than a tenant handbook that we hand out from the state of Minnesota Attorney General, and then they're kind of on their own. So this gives a local advocacy from the city to help them, and quite honestly, we can help the landlords too if they have issues with problem tenants. The ordinance that we had proposed also had some provisions for that to be dealt with as well.
So was there an ordinance that was proposed?
We had an ordinance written up in a draft format.
Can I get that,
Certainly.
please?
Yeah, we could share that back out with the council.
Yeah, I'd just like to go through it, but what about contacting these people and see if they're interested in that task force again?
We certainly could. I
You
know
know,
I've,
after the first of the year?
yes, after the holidays. Yeah, I actually have had a few of the people ask, hey, are you ever gonna get that going
Yeah.
again? I don't know if everybody would be interested, but yeah, I think that would be the next task. Hey, would you have interest in continuing to serve on that committee? And, you know, if we needed to open it back up, we could advertise
Yep.
quickly again if we needed to. But yeah, I definitely would wait till after the first of the year here at this point. But
Okay,
I definitely would wanna do that.
yeah. And then we can see where it goes from there. Perfect. Is that all you kinda needed? Was just, you were just gonna give an update and?
Yep, give an update, let you know where we had been, and yeah, I can, obviously Dwayne, I think you were the only one that wasn't on the council.
Correct.
We went through the workshop and everything at that point, so.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
Ken, how long do you feel that this group would have to meet, or?
I think we anticipated previously about 3 meetings, that we figured we would do that over maybe the course of about a 3-month time period, if we could just do a monthly meeting. We hadn't completely figured that out, but I think the intent was to start with, kinda like we've done here, a little bit of the background. We had some council members that went into much more detail on what a rental ordinance does, what other cities do in the area. And then the next one could be to look at the draft we had come up with, and then discuss if that committee would be recommending to move forward with one in some form of, you know, what we had drafted or not, and then pass that along to the council for deliberation at that point.
At what point do we, start making, how we're, establish the, boundaries on that for, are we gonna have 3? Are we gonna cut it off after one dysfunctional meeting, or, you know?
Oh, you're talking the committee, or?
Cause I can already see what's gonna happen, you know?
I think, the hope would be to have that dialogue in the task force committee meetings, and to come up with a consensus to bring
Mm-hmm. And I
like,
think,
like any other board or commission might
I
have.
think there could be a consensus. There's,
Yeah,
you know.
without going through it, I guess I'm not sure, but, the good part is we have most of the background work done. We have an ordinance example that was based off from Scott Riggs, our city attorney, that put together in Faribault. It was pared back based on the council discussion previously. We had a, crime-free housing component was, I believe, and that had been taken out. That had a whole another element to it that we just didn't wanna get into at this point, but,
Or you're not including that in there?
We had-
Okay,
varying,
Ours was softened up.
Yeah.
It didn't require some of the education and different parts of that.
but you're not including that in the task forces?
no, well, we would include the pared back version. I think there was
Okay.
some, like, almost like 3 strikes for certain crimes remainder in there, but it cut out, yeah, like Jim said, the educational component for landlords to take. I forget how many hours of training it would have required.
It was 8
Yeah,
every 3 years.
and that was a big topic for the landlords, that they couldn't kind of get their heads around.
Yeah,
So you did
Committing to
soften
that.
it up, and then when you go to form this task force, we're gonna get an updated version of
No, we
of
already
the
had
law
the,
enforcement?
we already had the updated version in front of the councils,
Oh, so that last packet that we got was,
had all that in.
and the law enforcement, because the law enforcement, as far as I'm concerned, was the major part of it. But that's when the city attorney had warned us that there was already lawsuits, and it'd be nice to see what happens with them. And
Correct, so he went back, rewrote that, taking out the components that were problematic in Faribault and, you know, a number of other communities that had the crime-free housing component, so yeah, we had already taken that out, but, yeah.
do you remember what the
definitely send
date
you
is on
the-
that? Because I know, I think, what do we got, like 3 packets?
Yeah, there were, we had
The
three
very
different,
last one is the one that we're talking about?
correct.
I'm in line kind of with Rick's, what I think Rick's thought was there, that, hoping for consensus as being a measure of success in this committee, that might be a challenging thing to achieve. But I think if your goal here, as you've written here, is just fleshing out the merits of it, and because there are some strong feelings on the landlord side against it totally.
Yep.
So if we achieve a good understanding, fleshing out how everybody feels good and bad about it, that might be a good result instead of trying to
well,
necessarily force a consensus that's much less effective than, you know, type of thing.
and I think maybe provide, you know, everything seems one-sided on those rental ordinances and, you know, providing some alternatives for the landlord when they have problems, you know, I mean, both ways, not just one way. And then also, you know, I wanna be careful that we don't open ourselves up for liability.
Correct.
Because, you know, we could go into a rental and red tag it and say, you know, hey, it's unoccupiable because the landlord didn't prevent heat, you gotta leave. And then what? If we don't put them up in a hotel or something, you know,
Yeah, and
and.
the ordinance
and
covers a
I've-
lot of the correction time periods, you know, if there's certain life safety, like if you had a gas leak, you know, obviously that
Yep.
is
Yep,
probably should be an automatic qualifier if you're immediate
yeah.
life danger, but yes, exactly like you're saying, we're not
But-
trying to put anybody out, but make sure that if they are there, it is safe and,
Yep, and you know what, so it doesn't open us up for liability because, you know, we just went and did this, you know.
Correct.
So,
okay.
okay, sounds good. Park board applications, interviews.
Yes, we currently have some openings on the park board, 2 of them, I believe. And we have received 3 applications from people recently who are interested in joining the park board.
You've got 2 openings and you've had 3 applications?
Actually, I have 3 openings.
All right, we
Oh.
now have 3, I guess. So we have 3 openings and 3 applications. General procedure would be to interview these people. And so if the council would like to, we can set up sometime in January, whether on a weekday evening or like a Saturday morning, to talk to these 3 individuals, I guess.
We could do it prior to a council meeting if we can get everybody to come in early, I would think.
Yeah.
You know,
And there's some more people that had said something about it, and I didn't have dates. If they're still interested, can they come in and apply?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We're open until filled at this point, I think. And in fact, all of our board spots are kind of just open, so people can submit applications and basically get put on a waiting list if a position was to open as well, so.
so, you know, I think if we would kind of, decide to interview, we could, what did we do the last time? Like, start the council meeting at 5? Or I shouldn't say start the council meeting, but we did the interview process, like, we started at 5 and gave them all each 15 minutes.
Yeah,
we
I
can
mean,
do
that's
that.
kind of how we've done it in the
Yeah.
past where we just,
And I think that's pretty standard practice.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I would like to do it on a council night, it'd be just letting, I wouldn't do it probably the first meeting.
The second meeting would be Monday, the 17th,
No, it won't, it'd be Tuesday,
Tuesday, the 18th.
yes.
So does the park board have a quorum if we don't have any of these 3 people?
We have to have all 4 there currently to have our quorum.
Okay,
That's why it's been difficult.
So we're not dependent upon these three positions. We don't need them.
We don't need them, but they would be very nice to have.
I meant for the January meeting. I'm just
Correct.
wondering.
Oh, no, we can still have a quorum.
Okay.
Just can't have anybody gone.
Okay, all right. So why don't we do that if everybody's okay with that?
I'm good, and you're gonna go at 5 o'clock?
Yeah, that's
On the 18th.
on the 18th, correct?
Yes, not the 17th.
Not the 17th.
You can show up if you want, but no one will be here.
Oh, you're the one that mentioned it.
You better be.
It doesn't, let's not point fingers at who's mentioning things. We'll just,
Okay, liquor license fee update.
yes. For the pandemic, New Prague, like many cities, lowered the fee for an on-sale liquor permit and cut it in half. According to state law, if we were to raise any liquor fees, we must do so after having a public hearing. And that public hearing requires 30-day notice to the holders of the license. So, that being said, I was wondering if the council would be interested in having a public hearing on February 7th. That would give us ample time to be able to get those out. The normal fees for the year will be updated probably at that first meeting in January. But fees for liquor licenses aren't due until April. It's kind of when that cycles through. So if we were to update the fees, we would then just do a fee schedule amendment to show those new fees kind of going forward from that point.
Okay.
Does anybody remember when we did that? Did we do it for a specific amount of time? Did it state right in the order?
It did state
1 year.
for like 1 year or whatnot, but it's kind of the opinion of council, or legal counsel basically, that the state statute doesn't really take into account any sort of temporary liens. It just says if there's ever an increase to a liquor fee, a public hearing has to be had.
Okay. I'm okay with
I was a little
that.
confused with how you described that. So if we're not having the public hearing till February, but we're approving the fee changes in January?
So, yes, so at the beginning of each year, we approve the fee schedule for the whole city. And on that fee schedule will still include the $13.50 for the on-sale liquor. Now, liquor, fee schedule amendments throughout the year are pretty common, as fees might change for one reason or the other. And the liquor license, I guess, calendar schedule is April 1st through March 31st. And so, because those fees aren't due until March 1st, approving them at one point at $13.50 and then changing them a month later wouldn't necessarily reflect how those people, or the payments for the new year, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Thank you. I guess I would wonder then if we want to keep it at 2,700 or if it should be adjusted. And not just this fee, but with the increase in expenses that the city and throughout, if there aren't merits for increasing fees, and I noticed on some of the other ones we approved earlier this meeting.
And that is something that we've been looking at kind of all month here. We have the directors go through, and we're not necessarily trying to make money off of anybody. In fact, I think there's some areas that say we specifically can't make money. But we do try to adjust our fees to compensate for our time that we're putting into it to make sure that the taxpayer isn't necessarily being burdened with us having to review a permit or something like that. And
I'm not suggesting we're trying to make money
Yeah.
at all, but I do feel that since we have an increase in our overall operation expenses for the city, that we try to keep fees in line with that, because if we don't, then it's
There'll be
coming out of
jumps.
our levy, and residentials are subsidizing these services.
And
Part of
we,
it, then.
yeah, and we'll continue to look at that here over the next couple weeks before you see it to make sure that those fees seem appropriate for the work that we feel we're putting into it. And the liquor license fee, I mean, it's just a hearing as to whether we're gonna change it or not. And so it
Yeah.
doesn't have to necessarily go to 2,700.
And it's just for the liquor license. You
Yes. so
don't have
that-
to have a public hearing for any other of the fees. Okay.
I can't speak to every single fee that's on there, but the ones that we're approving with the fee schedule, no. It would just be for the liquor license.
Okay.
Does the hearing state the actual fee that we're proposing?
I don't believe so. We basically just give notice that we will be increasing the
Okay.
liquor license fee.
So we got February 7th, any particular time?
That'll be just.
Just our
during-
It
normal.
would just, normal meeting, 6 o'clock.
Okay. The next item.
All right, next Yep,
Yeah.
the next item has to do with the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. This is something that we talked about earlier, that, with kind of the new rules of spending, it was possible that, we could count it as revenue loss and then use it towards any governmental operations that we chose to, as long as the money was spent before the end of 2024. After our auditors looked at it, they determined that we in fact could use all of it. In fact, I believe that, quote me if I'm wrong, they determined that we had $2.7 million of revenue loss. And so we could use our full $902,000 as count as revenue loss and use it anywhere in the city. We would just need to report on it. So what we need, they said that by the end of the year, we would need to submit a list to them just for auditing purposes of how we are going to use the money. And then we must officially report our list to the feds. I believe it is at the end of March, early April, whenever that particular report is due. And so this list can change. Even if we approve something tonight, we can talk about it again and it can change again. The list I put before you for how we could spend that money looked at a few things, a few upgrades around the city that would be needed to kind of take on how the city's grown, whether upgrading the servers, doing a water comprehensive study, as well as making a few renovations to City Hall that would allow for increased office space, for some space that we're not using, particularly in the break room and the kitchen. And then everything else that I put on the list, I took straight off of our existing CIP. My thoughts behind these particular uses for the funds were that there were things that we would either have to bond or levy for in the future, without necessarily adding things that we wouldn't have done otherwise. So I'm attempting to not create a one-off purchase that perpetuates itself when 15 years from now we decide we need to replace this thing because now we can't live without it. Or attempting to replace a recurring expense with a non-recurring revenue, so that we may save today but end up having to make up all that money on the back end when that revenue source disappears on us. So tonight, I guess I'm looking for maybe a little discussion on how you guys could see the ARPA funds being used, as well as, like I said, knowing that we have to have an official list at the end of this year, or we have to have an unofficial list at the end of this year, an official list by April. We could definitely discuss this again and see if we see any movement on how we could end up spending this money.
And how much did you say that the auditors said we lost?
2.7 million and change. I don't know the exact number. After they said 2.7, I figured, well, we only have $900,000 worth of funds, so they're.
I'm a little puzzled of why we have to submit a list if it's, if there's no restrictions against how the money is spent.
And I was puzzled as well. The auditor said that's just kind of the rule that's been set up. I think it's their way of keeping track to make sure that the money is getting spent by 2024 and it's not disappearing into some fund that won't get spent for many, many years.
So we're really just reporting that we're spent the money.
We're basically just reporting that we're gonna spend the money.
Okay.
Well, I like the fact that some of the expenditures are from our CIP list, because that will certainly save us money in 2022, 23, and 24. That's a huge number.
I know under ARPA, I mean, there was opportunities, if we didn't qualify for loss of revenue, there was economic development kind of, there was, 5 or 6 different avenues you could try to get funds. We don't have to worry about that. But I'm wondering if there's any economic development issues that should be considered, or did staff think about that kind of thing?
Yep, so I did not. It was one of those things where we found out very lately, and so I was trying to get a list together knowing that our deadline was sooner than later. We can definitely spend it on economic development issues if we wish. Like I said, we would just have to, I think, report on how we would want to end up spending these funds if we were going to do it that way.
And then how is it they came up with such a 2.7 million when it seemed like a lot of things that qualified for loss of revenue were COVID-related salary reimbursements and.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah,
in like fee?
yeah, so there's certain revenue sources that they decided this is gonna be able to count towards or against it. And so, there were some years where you may receive an increase in revenue due to a transfer of funds going one way or the other, that if you didn't have that transfer of funds, the next year, your revenue is suddenly down. Or, I don't even remember off the top of my head what the big one was. Do you remember, Patty?
Pardon?
What the big one that we ended up?
It was a county, when they redid County Road 37, we had acquired that from Scott County. We had gotten money from them to do that road. And so the next year, we didn't, in 2020, we didn't get that. And so that's what they banked that loss of revenue, a bigger portion of it.
Okay.
But it was items like that they would look at.
Was there any direct COVID-related write-offs that we didn't reimburse ourselves for from the CARES money? Like, people didn't pay us or things like that?
I was in the same thing in my head too, Bruce. Didn't we just pay off everything with all the COVID care money? Any losses that we really did have in COVID, wasn't that paid off with the last bunch of money?
Well, the first group of money that we did with the COVID money that we had received, do you recall that we had done a spreadsheet and that we had quite a few things that we had reimbursed ourselves for with that money, for the golf and the enterprise funds and the general fund and stuff. Now with this new group of money, it was pretty strict at the beginning, and they said, you know, primarily it's gonna be infrastructure, broadband, those kind of things, or loss of revenue. If it's loss of revenue, then you have your options.
Open up. Thank you.
I mean, this list can be changed. If you gotta meet the requirement, submit the list and.
Yep.
Is are you suggesting that this is the dating that we use, that we'd spend the money in 21, 22, and 23? Or are you front-loading it and spending it all in 22?
So this would be when we would use it, and so we wouldn't necessarily replace equipment in 24 early. We would just spend the money for the equipment in 2024. We have until the end of 2024 to ultimately spend our funds. And so I wouldn't take us off track, because, I mean, when you acquire equipment early, you're then gonna have to replace it early down. And so if we've got equipment that works, or even if there's equipment in 2022, or we got 2023 that works, we can push it off a year, just to try to prolong the life of the equipment, just knowing that we just have to have this fund spent before the end of 2024.
Some of these items, like, I can't recall city hall renovations, that isn't, it may be worded differently in the CIP, but I don't know that that is particularly on the CIP.
That particular one is not on the CIP, and we'd ultimately come back to discuss that again before anything happened. What that was doing was kind of looking at the space and how we're using City Hall, and attempting to create more office space, knowing that there might be growth of employees in the future. For example, if we do end up adding an EDA/planner position, the planning side of the building is extremely tight right now. And so it would be attempting to use some of the rooms, most notably the break room up here and the kitchen, knowing that we don't really have any need for the kitchen anymore, turning that into a break room, and then maybe using the break room and converting that into some offices that would free up some more space.
Don't we do Meals on Wheels? Did that end or something?
No,
I don't believe they use our kitchen anymore for
no,
that.
they don't. It's
Meals
Oprah.
and Wheels moved out like back in February, I want to say. And I talked to them a few times in the last month and a half, and there's no talks of ever coming back up here. They cater everything now, and they absolutely love it. It works out perfect, she told me. So there's no plans of them ever coming back up here, she told me.
Okay.
To me, the one of the biggest effects COVID's had on the city budget is the fitness center. I mean, the fitness center, it appeared to me to be almost at a break even before it was approaching it.
Right.
Before COVID, and it's gone completely backwards now to, you know, over $100,000 contribution. The fitness center?
No, it was never break even.
Well, when I was looking at the numbers kind of in the spring of 2000,
It was trending in that
trending
direction.
close
Yeah,
to that, I think.
yeah. It was trending in a very good way until
We never
got
saw
shut
that
down.
realized on our contribution, cause it just never got to that.
No, it never got to that point, but I think on a monthly, it was improving quite a bit, I think.
It was, yeah.
At that point in time.
Yeah.
But it certainly went the other direction, and that, the COVID, I believe, had a big effect on the financial part of it. The city didn't anticipate contributing that much money every year to it, as I
Right.
felt. So in some ways, we can't go backwards in time, but anything to support the city's budget to offset that additional expense that we have is, and if this is one way of doing it, I think that's a good way of doing it. But I would agree, we don't need to come up with new things to spend money on, doing it this way. It only seems like there's a couple things that you're adding on here that might not be in a CIP, so.
Correct.
And we can change it later.
Correct, we can
So
change it
if there's
later.
an economic development situation, we can address it then.
Correct. And so I guess I would just be looking up for approval of this list, kind of as a list that we can submit,
So
for,
moved.
for kind of our preliminary list.
Okay, Rick made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, by Bruce. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Okay. Next
Cub Scouts who only have 2 more items.
Yeah. The next item is, and actually, this is a quick council meeting, believe it or not. The update on the liquor license at the Rusty Spoke. Who wants to take that?
Honorable Mayor and Council, I will take that. You have before you a memo from me regarding the background check that was completed for Pauline Rachel Blazo doing Don't Be Lying LLC, doing business as the Rusty Spoke. Upon further investigation and background, 2 disqualifies were identified regarding Rule 7515.0410, eligibility requirements for background. Did reveal these 2 disqualifiers. Those were found in letter B, where the simple fact that an applicant is required to have good moral character and reputation. During the background, some of the information shared about the business and how it was gonna operate, sometimes would change on how she was proceeding with the business. And the fact that she, does continue a marital relationship with Ricardo Blazo indicates that he does have an interest in that business, and he has displayed some poor moral character based on issues with other liquor license and activities and violations. So that would be a disqualifier for you to not issue a liquor license to the business. And then also in letter D, again, anybody with interest in it pursuing a license shall have had an interest that, which was revoked within last 5 years for willful violations of any laws, ordinances, or any felon. In that, the same violation or same disqualifier would indicate that Ricardo Baldazo, Pauline's husband, was in a business interest in the entity pursuing the licensure for which such identified person previously had an interest in a license that was revoked within the last 5 years for a willful violation of any laws or ordinances or any felony. Based on those 2 disqualifiers, It is the recommendation of staff that the application not be approved for a liquor license.
Okay. Any questions?
Is,
Just wait,
is,
just wait.
is the fact that there is a marital relationship, is that addressed within any statute? I mean, it would be like having a best friend and in a relationship that maybe had a violation with a liquor license. So I just want to try to understand the importance of being married to someone that might not have their name on the business, may not be involved in the business, I can't say for certain. And because of their actions, it would affect the individual that's owning the business.
Yes, the idea of the liquor law as it is written along with these rules is to avoid that issue of a straw business where you turn a business over to somebody else because you are not eligible for a license. And that is the idea of these rules right here, that, because they do maintain a legal marriage yet, even if it is her fully involved in the business, he still retains some of that interest because of that marriage.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the council? Otherwise, I believe Pauline wants to speak. Come on up.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Pauline. Hi. Kind of along the lines with where you're going, Maggie. So we are legally married. I said he had, I guess to address that, business with someone else, I had no say or no interest in any thoughts on how that was operated. So I feel like, why can't that work the same way here? He's not gonna have any business interest, involvement in running it, just like I had none of his business over there. So I guess that's why I wanted to have that addressed. We are legally married, separated. He lives in a separate household. I'm 100% financing this, supporting my kids 100%, everything. I mean, I'm doing it all, so this is my business. I'm running it. Yes, we are legally married. I'm separated. He lives in a different city than I do. I guess I just want to bring that forward. As far as the second item, I mean, my understanding is the license wasn't revoked. They had the Department of Health removed, and they had a liquor license. So it was not revoked or denied under his name. So I don't know why that's playing into my company. I guess that's what I want, the other thing I wanted to address.
I think it's because of the marriage. That's plain and simple. It's, in Minnesota, the law, I think what's yours is his and his is yours until it's legally.
Even though I'm the sole owner. So if I had an operating agreement saying it would go to my brother, or if we got divorced, then I guess I'm trying to, I'm $300,000, I'm $20,000 into renovation, I got 40 more thousand to go on this to get it going. So what do I need to do to get my doors open?
I would suggest legal counsel for you. Talking to an attorney, to talk to the city's attorney,
Okay,
and laying it out, because as we see it, or I see it, your husband right now, whether you're separated or not, is still your husband. And still part of your stuff.
right,
No, I mean, it's just how Minnesota law works.
right. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, I was no part of their stuff, even though he
I
was in a
understand that,
business.
yeah.
I had no say, so I don't know why that then turns and impacts me when my marriage had nothing to do with their business.
But it could have, I think, you perhaps were wise not to be involved in his running of the business, but you could have been as a spouse. And the same situation here, as I understand it. Even though separate cities, separate households, unfortunately, you still have that legal connection.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, is it possible to table this and then she can go get an attorney and do her thing and then we can bring this back up? Or are we just gonna deny it and then she can reapply?
I think reapply is my opinion, but
Go to an attorney.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to, I mean, I could have got a divorce and just said he wasn't involved, and that would have been more shady, but I was trying to be just straightforward and truthful, so, like.
no, and you were, and we
Yeah,
appreciate
I mean,
that.
that's why, like, I feel like my moral character is,
Yeah. But
is
it, but
been
it,
upfront with his involvement.
it wasn't your moral character, it was
Right.
his, yeah.
Right.
And, yeah, so,
Okay.
okay. So with that, any other discussion? Otherwise, I'd take a motion to approve the recommendation of the staff.
So move.
And a motion, is there a second? I'll second it. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Opposed,
Oh, you oppose? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I would prefer to see it tabled.
Okay,
not-
that's fine. Motion carries.
Next item, last item for the Boy Scouts, is an upgrade to our network and servers. As I kind of explained in the memo, due to our recent technology expansion over the recent years, our servers and kind of network connectivity has grown a lot faster than we anticipated. And it was a recommendation from our the people we consult to for IT, that we actually are able to expand our system so that we are able to continue to connect fiber and that sort of thing. Bruce Reimers is here. He was a little bit more involved with the potential of this, so he may be able to speak to it slightly more than I could. But ultimately, this is something that would actually be a great thing to use ARPA money for, since it was previously unbudgeted, just not seeing how quickly this was coming up on us. So
So that list is gonna change already?
No, it's already on that
On the
list.
list.
it actually is on the list, so the list isn't changing yet. But was there anything you wanted to add, Bruce, I guess?
No, it just, we really just moved quicker than what we thought, and then we had some capabilities changed. Both the waste treatment and the utilities utilize radio systems right now to communicate between lift stations and water towers and pumping stations. That has proven to be troublesome here as of late. And we have the capabilities of getting fiber to those locations now, and actually have done so. And then have quickly outgrown our capabilities here at City Hall as our central hub. The Main Street project also brought about an opportunity now that we have a loop between City Hall and the power plant, which are our two main hubs that serve the whole city. We now have the capability to have a fiber loop between those two buildings and not having to use the county system to keep our connectivity. So it brings a lot of redundancy and capabilities for future growth. And I say that after we just went through an upgrade 2 years ago, but as we all know, technology changes faster than we care to think about. So the recommendation would be that City Council would approve the network and server upgrades using the ARP money.
So you mentioned that 2 years ago, or whenever we did a major upgrade, and we hired that individual, that company, to actually do the consulting on it. They didn't anticipate this then?
I don't think they anticipated our capabilities to be able to tie other city structures into it as quickly as we have.
Okay.
And there's a lot of savings on the back end too. I mean, part of it was used up by us being able to put in our IP phone system, and we've saved a lot of money in utilizing that aspect of it. And now with our SCADA control capabilities and monitoring, we're able to save on that end too, but we have to kind of keep building our own infrastructure to utilize that.
In the computer technologies write-up, they refer to citywide camera deployment initiative. What is our citywide camera deployment initiative?
Really, that initiative is driven, so for instance, we talk a little bit about the disposal area, or the area,
Yep.
you know, as far as being able to, we will then have the capabilities of being able to put cameras in those locations, or any city facility that's connected to our network, have it go to a central location so it can be monitored.
But we don't have lines going out to there, do we?
We do now, yes. We have fiber lines, I have fiber lines now to the lift station on the intersection of 12th and Columbus, so we would be able to get to
Close to
that
it.
area and monitor that as well.
So are you planning to use cameras somewhere else then, or?
Yeah, I mean, Jim has had some initiatives, he'd like to have some by the new roundabouts here and we made those provisions when we did Main Street. There's also a few other city buildings that we want to monitor,
Some of the parks,
our parks.
just protecting our assets. I know when the park was bathrooms were being damaged, I installed a couple portable cameras. We were able to catch a couple individuals that were involved in that. But that would be the idea, that we look out into the future using this technology. Some of the cameras, and we'll talk about this later on when the Boy Scouts aren't here sometime. But the idea would be maybe some strategic placings around the cities at roundabouts, so that when we do have stolen vehicles, a couple vehicles were stolen at Jeff Belzer, that we're able to monitor those cameras when we need to try and get leads on who may have taken those vehicles or something.
So that would be discussed further.
Yes,
Yeah.
as what would be appropriate, what the city council would envision as looking into the future and where they would wanna go with those.
This would more allow us just to be able to do that in the future, should we?
The structure, yeah.
Yeah.
And this was never on the CIP
In
at
a
all.
nutshell, we don't have enough connections here to be able to continue to serve the other functions and other facilities that we have.
And I think you mentioned on your previous list, it showed it as 2021. Is this a sense of urgency to this?
It is. We've got to make a couple server upgrades here fairly soon due to some firmware changes by the different companies that we utilize. And so they're kind of forcing our hand.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Do we need to make a motion on using these funds? I think we do.
Yes, yeah, one way or the other, yes, please.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the network and server upgrades as proposed in the memo.
Okay, there's been a motion
And the
made.
agreement, I should say. We have an agreement here as well.
There's been a motion made by Maggie. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second by Bruce. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay. So now we're down to miscellaneous. Basically, the minutes,
Yes, those are just an FYI,
Yep.
the inclusion of the planning commission minutes from here last week.
okay. So I'll go around the table. Rick?
Do we have any other information on the, gas and oil that was found in the sanitary system?
Storm sewer system.
Yes.
At Holiday. Yeah, that was capped late summer. I just got an email from them last week. They're gonna do a final review, but it looks like everything has been taken care of as of right now. So when they capped that line, that was dripping into the creek from the fuel leak that was at Holiday, that has all been, actually 99% of it was removed. There's a piece that could not remove because it was directly underneath a transformer, so we allowed them to cap both sides of it.
Steve, you okay with all that?
I thought,
I will say we worked very close
Phillips
with the fire
Gavin.
department on.
Well, he's standing out there with a fire extinguisher all the time, you know.
wasn't there another, somebody was pouring in sanitary sewer?
Oh, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah,
I apologize, Rick. Yes, we are working on that. We have determined where, it's coming from. We are doing a few tests, to verify, cause there's three buildings connected to one sewer line. We're trying to verify which building it is out of the three before I talk to all three of them. I would like to try to eliminate it to just talking to the direct source.
okay.
Does that stuff stay in the pipes? I mean, so you could actually go to the, inlet, or the outlet and,
We cambered the sewer line to determine exactly what service it was coming from. Like I said, there's three businesses on one service. We're trying to eliminate the other two to know we know the exact one.
And that infiltration could have screwed up our numbers. That's what you're thinking, okay?
Well, you know, cause I'm thinking about the PVC drying out like it did and getting so brittle, and then we had to replace a lot of them fittings with stainless steel. That was a pretty expensive deal.
That wasn't from the oil though, but we did have, so in the waste treatment plant, we have a clarifier room that kind of throws a lot of oxygen into your sewage to break everything down, throws chemicals. We noticed it about 3 weeks ago that it was black, and it's usually a very light brown, so we knew something was not right. And then when we did a lot of investigating, we found it at a lift station. Once we found it at the lift station, we chased it down even farther with the help of the street department to determine exactly where it's coming from. So we could have found our needle in a haystack that we talked about a long time ago.
And the result of that is they can pay for any damage that it caused?
It's way too early to talk.
Yeah.
We would have to talk to Scott about that, but no, I would doubt that would be the route we would go, but that's something we would have to talk to him about.
I think it would be if it's intentional or if they don't even know that it's happening.
Bruce?
Yeah, thank you.
Not really anything, just congratulations, Patty, on another successful budget process and last one with the city. But no, I have nothing else.
Okay. I had something and I can't, remember, but I just want to thank the Cub Scouts from Troop 323 for coming and presenting the colors tonight. You did a great job, and I talked to them last Tuesday? And boy, did they have some good questions. So, you know, this is how it works. This is how government works a little bit in a small town. And, you know, if you're ever interested, you just gotta sign on the dotted line and when you're old enough, so.
You guys did a great job, thank you all.
Thank you.
So, Maggie,
I don't have anything, but yes, thank you for your patience during our meeting and staying awake. It's something that we struggle with sometimes too.
you're welcome. And, city administrator,
Nothing.
planning director,
Nothing.
finance director. Nothing. Utilities manager,
Nothing.
okay, police chief?
Oh, geez.
Do not have any.
Public works director, fire chief.
All is good.
Well, good. What, did you have a boring evening setup that you decided to come?
Banking on the Vikings losing.
Oh. All right, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Hey, Steve.
They just got the ball back.